So now we're going to talk about reflexes. Okay, so reflex, the very general understanding it is an automatic response to a stimuli, right? And so if we want to talk about the stimuli that are being influenced, we're looking at the actual neuron. So if you remember from previous videos, I put the acronym SAME. So SAME is referring to the two different types of neurons that are involved with the nervous system. The S is for sensory, right, or afferent. Sensory carries information towards the central nervous system. And then you have motor, or efferent. This carries information away from the central nervous system, all right? And so the reflexes are regulated via this problem. And so very common form of reflex that's very standard in practice is the patellar reflex, where the doctor grabs a hammer, hits you on the patellar tendon, and your knee just kicks up, right? I hated to go to the doctor for this situation because this is the one time in my life I felt like I didn't have control over my body. But again, it taught me a big lesson about reflexes, right? So the mechanism starts very simply. You begin with a stimuli. So the stimuli comes in, right? So that stretch response that's generated, right? The stimuli causes an activation of your sensory neurons. So your sensory neurons become active. And what did sensory neurons do? They brought information towards the central nervous system. And so where everything converges now is your spinal cord, right? So you have your spinal cord here. If you remember, I'll just draw a little basic drawing of the spinal cord. You see the little gray matter. Okay, that's terrible, right? Doesn't look good at all. Let me just make little scribbles. All right, so sensory neuron brings all this information through the rami and enters the dorsal region through the dorsal root. And now where all the information is in the dorsal horn, being for further processing. Information gets processed now. Now it gets projected to the bottom region, or in this picture, or the ventral region, which is the ventral horn. And the ventral horn projects everything out of the ventral root, and then eventually reaches the rami, and then it goes and creates a response, right? And so now you have this release of information through these motor neurons. So you have these release of information through these motor neurons, right? And the motor neuron's main function is to create some kind of reaction, some kind of contraction or relaxation. And so what do you notice? You get a response. So your knee kicks. And this is sort of an automatic response. So this is an example of the patellar reflex, right? And so what's really important is to really understand that this is not any kind of conscious control of the reflex, right? Other reflexes, for example, the hot plate reflex, you're cooking on a Sunday night, you realize, okay, I want to have a good time, I want to relax. And so the best way to do that is make myself breakfast in the morning, or have someone else make your hubby or whatever, your boo, whatever you guys call nowadays, make you your breakfast in the morning. So they wake up, they're in a rush because they woke up late, and you're constantly nagging them, let's go, I'm hungry. And so they don't pay attention, and they grab the stoving plate, the very hot stove handle, and then what do? They let go immediately, they scream, they start swearing and saying a couple bad words, a couple offensive words, and then they don't feel good for the rest of the day. And so that kind of completely ruins their Sunday. And you, on the other hand, are still waiting for that specific breakfast. All right, so that's called the hot plate reflex. So the hot plate reflex is very similar to this mechanism, right? So you have the stimuli, you have the information being transmitted from the sensory neuron to the spinal cord, right? However, one thing you really notice too that's different is that you become consciously aware of it. And I remember I told you about in the beginning of the video regarding interneurons. So there are special types of neurons called interneurons. These interneurons innervate the sensory and motor neurons in order to create some kind of either amplification or inhibition of stimulus. All right. So in this case, you want some kind of amplification of the reflex stimulus in order to drop the plate. You don't want to get third-degree burns making some kind of omelet that no one would probably eat, right? So these interneurons actually connect your spinal cord in your response to the higher brain center. So higher brain center. So now this is why whenever the actual plate becomes very hot, you not only let it go via a natural reflex, but also you become very consciously aware of it. And so this is in part because of the interneurons innervating the higher brain center in order to amplify that reaction in sort of a synergistic manner.